I want to start documenting my trips. So we just got back from Alabama. I'm going to show you all about what we did, where we stayed, what we loved. There's a scary story in there and there's a funny story in there. And I can't wait to share it all with you. And the very first thing I have to know, what is your favorite road trip treat? Because we were going on a road trip. We were going to Alabama from Utah. So we had a long way to drive. We planned on 3 days to get there and then 3 days at least to get back. And we were staying in Alabama Gulf Shores right there on the beach for 2 nights, 3 days. I can't remember. It's all a blur. My favorite road trip treat, which I cannot say no to, are these Jordan almonds. And oh my gosh, I broke a whole quarter of one of my big molars off of my tooth eating Jordan almonds. They're so hard. They're so hard usually, but I found ones that are like when they're fresh, they're so soft. From Winco, I have found the very, very best. They are just perfect. You can chew on them and they're not going to crack a tooth off. Well, I forgot mine. I had 2 bags ready to go at home and I totally left them at home. So when we were in Wyoming somewhere, we stopped at Little America and guess what? They had Jordan almonds. And so I should have got 2 bags because this didn't last me the whole way. And then halfway through the trip, we were hunting for more and didn't find any. On our way to Alabama, we have the bikes in the back. We have gone about probably 200 miles. That means we only have about 1,780 miles left. We got a long way to go. But we made it to Fort Collins, Colorado, got a really nice hotel and headed out really quickly for a night ride. And it was just beautiful. It was golden hour. And as we were driving out, the sun was just so perfect and beautiful. And then as we were coming back, the moon was just peeking through the clouds, so pretty. And it was just the best start to our trip. You know, we took our e-bikes because Rick and I love to ride our e-bikes on trips. And it was the first ride of the trip and it was just so pretty. So the next morning we got up and we got right back in the truck and we started heading from Fort Collins to Wichita Falls. And of course, Rick is always saying, why don't you try and Google what there is to do? Are there any sites we should be seeing while we're in Texas and all of that? And so of course I'm looking at all of these different sites and things. And one of the biggest cities that we were passing through was Amarillo, Texas. That's when I discovered something crazy out in the middle of nowhere. The Cadillac Ranch. I just quickly read about it. What on earth is this? Well, apparently some Texas billionaire drove 10 Cadillacs into his field. He owned a lot of land, drove 10 Cadillacs into one of his fields one day and decided along with a group of artists to create a piece of artwork with those 10 Cadillacs. And so he drove them nose down into the dirt. Like he buried the engines into the dirt, put them on a 60-degree angle to mimic the pyramids of Giza. They weren't all old. I think they still ran. I think they were able to drive into the field. I don't know all of that, but I think so. That was in 1974. And some of the Cadillacs were only, I think there were some 68s, some 50s. Anyway, they weren't that old of cars. And he just, you know, when you have that much money that you can just drive 10 cars into the ground forever and write them off, you have a lot of money. Anyway, we had to stop and look at it. It was fascinating. And so people have come out and they started spray painting. And at first they started taking off chunks of these cars, you know, because there's this popular tourist attraction or site to see. And people were taking off pieces of the cars. People started spray painting them. And at first, I think they thought, why are people doing that? And then they openly embraced it. In fact, welcomed it. They even have a little trailer outside of Cadillac Ranch now where you can buy spray paint and you can spray paint the cars. Well, there are places on those cars where the spray paint is a foot thick, like literally a foot thick. You look at the wheels. I went up to one and was spinning the wheel and there's a big old bulge on the top of the wheel where you can see, or on the side of the wheel, where you can see it's just spray paint collected year after year after year. And not only that, but on some of them you could see where there had become so much spray paint that it literally just folded in the summer sun. Like it was folding like fabric. It's just crazy. That was cool. So as we were walking out, of course, because we're from Utah, I had to get a t-shirt. I mean, you know, Texans don't care. Utahns care. I wanted a big old t-shirt. I got it in XL. I'll wear this to the gym. I'll wear this any day. I'll wear it. We could not believe how inexpensive hotels are. You know, a lot of times we go to San Diego to see my son and hotel rooms are $200 and $300 a night, even the cheap ones. But we were in Wichita Falls. We stayed for $98 plus room and taxes. I think made it up to like I don't know, 108 or 115, not much at all. And we had this big old kitchenette. We had room enough for the bikes. It was a great little condo type room. The next day was insane, and I have to tell you about it. But first, we jumped in the truck. Again, I was Googling what to see and do, and we happened upon the world's largest Bowie knife. And that was interesting. My son loves knives. He collects them. He just sits and flicks them all day long for fun. And so we stopped and saw that. And then there's a sad story, and then there's a scary story. Okay, so sad story is we stopped at the Buc-ee's. I told Rick, let's stop at Buc-ee's. We don't have Buc-ee's in Utah, and everybody talks about Buc-ee's like they're such a great thing. They're so amazing. And oh, you've got to stop at Buc-ee's. So we pulled in, and he was filling up his gas. He decided to leave it in and let it keep going while we walked into the store. And as he started to step over the gas hose, he tripped and he went straight down, flat down on his face on the concrete. I felt sick about that. He really scraped up his arm, his hands, his knees. Thankfully, since his stroke, most of it was on his left side, so he couldn't really feel how bad it was, although it was uncomfortable for him. But like his scrapes and things weren't as bad as they would have been pre-stroke, because he is still numb. If you're new here, he had a stroke a couple of years ago, and his whole left side from top to toe is numb. He can use it, but it's very numb. He can't feel it. So that was a blessing. But I just felt so sad for him, and it just made me sad. So when we went into the store, he was mad. It made him mad. We were in there and it was so big and there were so many people, and he's like, let's get out of here. And I thought he hated it. So I was thinking, oh, this is not the Buc-ee's experience that I was thinking of. But anyway, we stayed in Shreveport. Here's the second story. This is a scary story. We checked in the hotel, and when we were unloading the bikes, we thought, let's just go for a little ride. So we went down this beautiful little side street, and then we came back up and went around to the next hotel, which was right next door to the Homewood Suites. And it was an old Ramada Inn, but it had like grown in, like the weeds were taller than me. It was boarded up. It looked like it had just been left. We were hearing bang, bang, like inside. Every now and then we'd hear a bang, and I thought, oh, they're working on it. They're reconstructing, they're fixing it. But that's not what it was. As we got driving around, I mean, there's spray paint saying paranormal inside, do not enter. And there was a doorway where one of the boarded up doors had been kicked in or broke in. Anyway, it was just so eerie. And we were driving around, and you could literally, a lot of the windows were broken out, and you could literally see into the hotel and see that there was still artwork on the wall. There were chairs like tossed out in the parking lot. You could see tables and lamps still inside. It's like Ramada just shut their doors and walked away, left all their furniture, left everything. I imagine there were beds in there because there were sheets hanging out the window. We kept hearing this bang, bang, and I was looking up like, what is that sound? And then all of a sudden, a lamp came crashing out one of the upstairs bedroom windows, crashed out onto the roof, the lower portion of the roof. It freaked us out so bad. We never saw a person. We didn't see an arm throwing it out, but I know it was probably some homeless, somebody living in there. Can you imagine? It was left with all the furniture. It was boarded up and stuff, but people were going inside, obviously, and it would have been a literal homeless dream because the beds were still there. I mean, if there's sheets and if there's tables and lamps and artwork on the wall, I'm assuming there were beds. I couldn't see any just because all of the windows were up higher. It was insane. We were a little creeped out. After that happened, we were like, I wanted to go in between the buildings and go look at the pool, but there was spray paint in there, and I thought, oh, there could be somebody in there just waiting for us to come, and they would stab us with their drug needles or something. So we didn't go close, but we went back to the hotel, and all I could think about that night was, as I was walking through the beautiful Homewood Suites of Shreveport, how would this look if it was empty, if it was abandoned like next door? And I was thinking those big heavy hotel room doors, they probably just had to kick those in to get there and smash out those windows and stuff, because almost every room had windows smashed out. Not all of them, but so many of them had windows smashed out. And I'm just thinking, they're in there living. They are living in there. Can you imagine that? That was sketch. So the next morning we were going to drive straight to Gulf Shores, Alabama, but we decided that night, let's first go for another ride and just check it out again, because I wanted to see it again, and so did Rick. Because I had looked online, there's YouTube videos about it. Apparently it is, it's just abandoned. On one side there was a door that had been boarded up, but it had been kicked out. The board has been ripped off, so you could literally just walk into the hotel in there. Oh my gosh, and Rick got off his bike and he's like, I'm gonna go peek in. I'm like, no. And so he did, and I was like, ain't no way I'm going in there. But then after he came out, and got back on his bike and we were riding around some more, he's like, that was cool. You could see this and that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I want to go peek in. So I went back and I peeked in and I took my video and I walked right in and just held it there for a minute so I could see what was inside, but so creepy, so sketchy. Anyway, Got back in the car, and then we went to the Duck Commander where the Duck Dynasty guys are. And I'm like, we gotta stop at the Duck Commander. And so we did. We used to watch Duck Dynasty all the time when it was brand new and when it was cool and fun. Just being there was so interesting. I loved it. We went inside, saw the shops, saw the stores. We even ran into some LDS missionaries. You know, my son is on a mission right now in Guatemala, so it was very special to us to be able to talk to these two boys who were on a mission. One from Utah and one from Hawaii. Yeah, Hawaii. We got back in the truck and we went to Vicksburg. Okay, Vicksburg, Louisiana. I started looking up things to do in Vicksburg. There's so much history that I don't remember about in all the history books, but there's so much history around Vicksburg, Pennsylvania. Vicksburg, Louisiana. There's a whole Civil War national military park. And so we decided we would stop and take our bikes and just go right around. And it was fascinating. It was a beautiful little trail. There were so many monuments and different markers about different things that had happened there, and rolling hills where the Civil War had happened and so many people had died, and so much rich history about our nation that happened there. And just standing there and looking over the valley at one point, I was like, oh my gosh, if these hills could talk. It was so interesting. We had a lovely bike ride. It was beautiful. We went and saw so much that was just, if you're ever in Vicksburg, Louisiana, you have to stop and look at it because it is just wonderful. It was a beautiful place. We didn't pull into our Airbnb at Gulf Shores until late that night. It was dark. We pulled in and we were like, oh my gosh, there's two couples, Rick and I, and then my sister and brother-in-law, Kelly and Troy. And we were the only ones there. We were the only ones there besides her mother. 12 bedrooms. And when we got there, Troy and Kelly said, it took us about an hour to pick out which bedroom we wanted to stay in. They were beautiful. It was a beautiful Airbnb. All of the rooms were just very nicely decorated in kind of a coastal, airy style. There were different family rooms, you know, on each level. There were 5 laundry rooms. Every room almost had their own bathroom. It was just beautiful. And we finally decided on a room, and then we went to bed that night. But that was so fun. What a beautiful, I said to Kelly, why don't we have an Airbnb like this that we could rent out or go and stay and visit sometimes and just rent it out ourselves, you know, go and stay, have someplace where we can just go and stay by the beach. The beach was beautiful. But that's the next day. One of my favorite things to do when I'm at the beach is to get up early in the morning and go and just walk down the beach. And so we had a morning walk that morning. It wasn't super early. I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. And we just went out, and that sand, it reminded me of Florida sand because it's right down there by Pensacola, and it had just the coolest sand where if you dig your feet into the sand as you're walking, it makes a little squeak, squeak. The sand felt so good, and I just thought, I am grounding myself in the sand from the earth, bare feet. It felt so nice. There were tons of little tiny seashells all over by the water, and it was just so beautiful. I went over and had lunch at Tacky Jack's, which I highly recommend. One of my favorite things to do when I'm at a restaurant is to say, what is your recommendation? And this cute girl from Jamaica, she's like, you have to get the Royal Reds. So they were shrimp, and they were so, so good. Oh my gosh, they were so delicious. I highly recommend, if you're ever at Tacky Jack's down by Gulf Shores, Alabama, do go and order the Royal Reds. I ate the whole pound of them, or was there 2 pounds? I can't remember, but they were so good. Somebody ordered some gator bites to try, and I tried them thinking, oh, it just tastes like chicken, right? That's what somebody told me. Oh, gator just tastes like chicken. Well, there had some kind of an aftertaste, and it was funny because one of the girls there caught my reaction. I was really excited to try it, but then the aftertaste hit and it was just not good. After we ate, we drove over to Fort Morgan, which is a very old military fort. That was very cool. We got to see a lot of different things in there. And I love the history of old forts and just imagining them protecting the borders, you know, where the seashore is. And oh, it's just fascinating. So that was fun. We waited for sunset and we went and took pictures on the beach. I loved that, every minute of it. The only thing was that when I was taking pictures of Rick and I, when it was our turn, Rick kept looking at these guys golfing. These boys would come down and they would golf and just hit golf balls into the ocean. And Rick could not help but sit and stare at them while we were supposed to be looking at the camera and taking pictures. And we decided, since Rick and I had our e-bikes, my brother and sister-in-law would get up and rent e-bikes too. And we went to the Gulf Shores State Park, and there are so many beautiful trails and bike rides. You could take a walk, you could take a bike ride for miles and miles and miles. It was so pretty. And we even had this one guy telling us, he was at the bike rental place, and he's like telling us about the alligators. And he's like, I said, do you think we'll see some alligators? He's like, oh yeah, I'll tell you where they are. And he showed us on the map. So we actually did see all 3. We saw 3 alligators, and that was so cool. So cool. Then we walked across the street to the lodge at Gulf State Park, and that's where we had lunch, and I actually got myself a souvenir. You know, usually on trips, I like to pick up a new ring. Can't get enough rings. I want to get one that I love, love, love for this middle finger, but I didn't see anything I loved. So instead, I saw a sweatshirt there that I thought would be really cute. Rick bought that for me for my souvenir. That was our last night, and I just remember thinking, I've got to go back down to the beach. I want to go watch the sunset. I want to dig my feet in the sand one more time and watch the sun go down. And it's just such a spiritual experience to me, you know, to be there and the majesty of the ocean and just the air, the fresh air, the wide open spaces, salty smell of the sea. It was beautiful. And I stood there and just was in amazement just how beautiful that sunset was. And I stayed until it got dark by myself and just watched and felt and listened because I knew that we were driving away tomorrow. We were heading back to Utah. Our last night here on Gulf Shores. Look at that beautiful sky. My gosh. I am standing here with my feet in the sand, grounding, just feeling the energy from the sand, looking at the beauty, deep breathing, the ocean air, listening to the waves. We head back tomorrow. But I just love the beach and I want to stay here. It's just so pretty, but I know it's time to go. We have more fun on the way home, but this has been a delight. Stand here and deep breathe with me. Okay. Funny thing is, I watched the sun go down and then I was determined the next morning I was going to get up and watch the sun come up again. And so I did that and I set my alarm early and I went out again to be there on the beach when the sun came up. And I was, and again, it was just another like Mother Nature just saying hi. And Cami, this is for you. You know, I loved every minute of it. I know that sounds really, really weird, but I know that there are a million things going on in this world, a lot of bad things, wars and politics and contentions. But when you are on the beach and you're watching the sunrise, everything is good in the world. Everything is good. I loved watching that sun come up and I just spent time there by myself again on the beach in the morning, just feeling it. And that's when we headed straight to New Orleans because I've been there before, but he's never been there. New Orleans is not Rick's kind of place, nor is it mine. I feel like New Orleans is like a scuzzy Las Vegas. Like it's dirtier, it's smellier, it's weirder. I mean, Las Vegas is pretty weird, but this is a little bit weirder. But anyway, we went for sure because back in the day, my girls and I went on a trip there and we stayed at the Royal Sonesta, which was right downtown on Bourbon Street. And so I'd been there before and I remember tasting the best crab cakes I've ever had at the Desire Oyster Bar. That was part of the Royal Sonesta. And you know what? I was so disappointed because I'm like, we gotta go have those crab cakes. And we went and got them and they weren't good. They were fine. But they were just like all the other crab cakes, fine. But I remember them being outstanding and they're no longer outstanding. Anyway, whatever. So then we walked across the street and we went to Cafe Beignet and we got Rick his very first beignet, listened to the band for a little while. That was fun. And then that night we drove on and we stayed in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Lake Charles, Louisiana? Hey Google, is Lake Charles in Texas or Louisiana?
On the website cityoflakecharles.com, they say, the city of Lake Charles is conveniently located off Interstate 10 between Houston, Texas and New Orleans, Louisiana.
That doesn't answer my question. Anyway, wherever Lake Charles is, we stayed there. And then the next morning we went to San Antonio because that was another place that I had been, but Rick has never been. We got to go to the Alamo, we got to go to the Riverwalk, and we ate one of our best meals ever at the Hard Rock Cafe that night. And I had the most delicious salmon. Oh, it was so good. And then we walked around the Riverwalk, which is so beautiful and so fun. And then we got ice cream. And then we went back to the room, which was an Embassy Suites. And again, it was a little more expensive, but again, cheaper than usual. It's a beautiful room. It was probably my favorite room of all the whole trip. It was just pretty. We called it the rusty metal room because the wallpaper was like rusty metal. And I'll show you a picture, but it was a really nice room. The next morning we got up and we decided to ride our bikes down the Riverwalk where we could ride bikes because down inside the city, you can't ride bikes where the Riverwalk is. But the Riverwalk goes for miles and miles and miles, like outside of the city. And it hooked up right close to where our Embassy Suites was. And so we jumped on our bikes and we rode on that for a while and we stopped and had lunch at Wingers. That bike ride took us for a while and that was so, so fun. Got back in the truck, drove to Lubbock, Texas, where we had, the best cheesecake factory dinner. and I had chicken Madeira, and it was so, so, so good. But again, I walked through that Embassy Suites, and all I could think about was the Ramada in Shreveport, Louisiana, and think about imagining it completely barren and quiet and empty, furniture still there, and people roaming the halls and living in there. That's all I could think about. We jumped on our bikes again once we got to Lubbock. We actually found an LDS temple, which we went and rode around for a little while. We stopped at Natural Grocers just to see if they had a Jordan almonds, because at this point I was out and I was on the lookout for more Jordan almonds. I was out and I have to have more. We headed up and drove to Albuquerque, and on our way I put on the Menendez Brothers podcast, and that was fascinating, and that kept us entertained the whole way through boring parts of Texas. That night we decided to stay in Albuquerque. We went down to Old Town and we had a really delicious dinner at a cute restaurant there, walked around for a little while, got caramel apples. And the next day was my birthday. And the funnest part about my birthday was that my son called from Guatemala. He and his two companions sang happy birthday to me in Spanish, the way they sing it in Guatemala. And it was the sweetest thing. I actually tried to screen record it because it was through Facebook Messenger, but apparently when you screen record Facebook Messenger, you get no sound. So there was no sound, but it was the cutest thing ever. And it just made me so happy. I loved it. That was the best birthday singing I had ever had. And speaking of my birthday song, the funniest thing was that my father-in-law tried to call my phone and he thought he was calling me, but he said, you never answered. And then finally you answered. And so I sang you happy birthday, because he calls and will sing happy birthday on the phone. And then he realized, well, after he sang the whole song, the lady on the other end said, well, it's not my birthday and I'm not Cammie. And he had just sang this whole birthday song to her, and I don't know who it was. And he doesn't know who it was, but that was funny. So he called later that afternoon. He called Rick's phone and was able to sing to me. But I still think that is so, so cute. One of these days I would love to capture that, because he's 98 years old. I want it recorded. I would love to have it for forever and for all time. So that night we went to Moab, and I love Moab. And I've always known that there's this beautiful little ride that you can take bikes on. And so we got out, it was pretty early, not too late in the day. There was still some sunlight, and we thought we'll go and we'll ride this cute little bike ride. It was absolutely gorgeous. The red rocks were stunning. The river was beautiful. It was just gorgeous. And then as it got dark, we thought, let's go back to the Broken Oar where we have eaten before, because that's where I wanted to eat for my birthday dinner. The shrimp cocktail was like none other, just so, so good. I don't know what made it different than normal, but just so good. And then I had the beef medallions. They were out of this world. I enjoyed every bit of it, including cheesecake at the end for my birthday. If you can't have cheesecake on your birthday, when can you have it, right? And then we just decided to stay in the hotel where we actually parked the bikes, and it was a Hilton. It was my place, the Hilton, my place. And it was beautiful. We were tired after we ate. We just didn't want to drive any further. And so we just stayed there, really nice hotel. And the next day we were home. As much fun as it is to be on a trip, I find it even more fun to come home. I am thankful for where I live. I enjoy living out in the country, out away from a lot of crowds. I love to be home. It doesn't matter if you're in the city, wherever home is for you, home is where the heart is. And I was so excited to see Toby, because I know how much he would have missed me after almost 2 weeks. And he did. He loves me. I'm his favorite. And that was it. Now I'm so thankful to be home, because I am a self-proclaimed homebody. I would rather be home. Rick, on the other hand, he wants to always go, which I'm gonna have to get used to. And I'm gonna have to get, now that we're at about retiring age, I am gonna have to get used to wanting to pick up and go. He wants to go anytime. Thank you for following along with our trip to Alabama. I'm doing this mostly for me, so that I have kind of a video journal of what we did, and just so that I can remember it always. All right, see you in the next video.